So without further ado, I would like to introduce formally Stacie Jacob. Welcome, Stacie.
Thank you, Sandra. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us and share with us some best practices about winery, PR, brand strategy, and marketing. We're just so excited to welcome you aboard and learn more about your areas of specialty.
Fantastic. Yes, it's there's always a changing wine world out there, and it's exciting as we kind of dive into the ever-changing world of marketing and public relations.
Wonderful. Well, we are just excited to watch your presentation this morning. Again, for those of you who have just joined, we'll be listening to Stacie here for about 20 minutes as she presents best practices around winery, PR, marketing, and brand strategy. Also, for those of you who have just joined, we will be visiting the Paso Robles and San Luis Obispo areas in our Central Coast Roadshow next week, August 23rd and 24th. So a great opportunity for you to also meet up with Stacie live. So Stacie, I'm going to go ahead and turn it all over to you now for your presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. So my name is Stacie Jacob. I am based here currently in the Paso Robles area, and started Solterra Strategies about 5 years ago. That was really after about 25 years experience working in the wine industry, but really my start got started in public relations. As I always remind folks, I'm originally from the Nebraska area. I grew up on a small family farm in Nebraska, and it's always interesting. Everyone, how did you make the leap to wine? And there's so many more similarities than one might imagine overall. And so with that, I went to the University of Nebraska and got my start at a company called Fleishman Hillard in the public relations arena. The focus there was, really immersing myself in so many different aspects of what was happening in the wine, and just in public relations in general. We helped companies communicate about changes going on in their business. We helped companies, really understand their messaging platforms. So it was as I always tell people, I don't necessarily have an MBA, but working at a PR firm like Fleishman Hillard, you essentially get on the ground practice at that particular level. So it was a really awesome start. And one of the things I always remind folks is this world is really about connections and those relationships that you build. So a funny connection back from my hometown in Nebraska is actually what introduced me to the wine world. So who would have ever thought? And that's what led me to my first entry into the wine industry up in Washington State for the Washington Wine Commission. There I had the opportunity to serve as the statewide commission's first ever public relations director. It was a great way to learn the wine business in Washington, because they were also trying to communicate and tell people about the fact that they make wine in the state of Washington. So that was a pretty awesome opportunity to be able to communicate the fact that wine is made here in the Washington area, and there's a lot to be had. And now, as many of you know, that industry has grown tremendously to over 1,000+ wineries. And then, of course, that position set me up well to move to Paso Robles to lead the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance, where I served as their executive director for about 7 years before starting Solterra Strategies. As we were talking about kind of identifying your audience and making sure that your brand speaks to your audience, some of the facts that I encourage people to take a look at is, as we mentioned, the website traffic, as well as understanding your customer buying trends. So, understanding, is there a certain price point that your customer is comfortable with? Is there value-added opportunities here based on what your customer is wanting? What can we learn from those various components? How often is your customer visiting your tasting room? Are they coming to your tasting room and then buying additional product online or calling? What are some of those trends which will help you better understand how your brand is resonating with your customer overall? And then social media is something that I think is important to take a look at those insights. We're big fans of having a strategy around social media. Social media is a tool that I encourage people to use these days. It is something that can create a lot of buzz. It's not necessarily something that will sell your product, but it is another noise generator. And as we know, there's a lot of noise out there these days, and we have to build meaningful messaging and engagement. And I think that's one way that social media can help engage and continue bringing more and more excitement into a specific brand if people get excited about certain aspects. Other stats to take a look at that are at your fingertips, your email list. How often do you take a look at how many people are on your email list? How do you acquire new names into your email list? Do you ask people to join your list? It's always shocking to me how often people are just willing to give their email addresses to folks. And how are you engaging in that audience and in that conversation with folks? And then knowing where your customers live. And we're going to get into, as we get into the marketing side, into events, understanding where your customers live is a key strategy to understanding your marketplace, whether you're focused on direct-to-consumer, the three-tier system, or a combination of both. And all of that will help you engage and define your persona of your audience and then plan your marketing strategies. Because the key here is there's a lot of things that folks can be doing, but we want to focus your outreach and then, of course, measure your results overall as your brand. Okay, we can go to the next slide now, please. If you go back one slide. So I wanted to just do a little overview on Adelaida Sellers, which is one of the clients that we've worked with in redefining really their label design, which really has helped redefine their brand. One of the things that we took a look, you've got a 25-year-old brand here with Adelaida, and great wine in the bottle, fantastic estate, a really great story in terms of the family history of how they came to the area, the site selection for their various vineyards, but the message on the label didn't really resonate overall. You had some fans that loved the faces, but the message on the label didn't even resonate with the winemaker and the owners as a whole. And so we did really a deep dive exploration with Adelaida and interviewed all their key stakeholders, helped understand what the brand was about, and it kept coming back to this one thing of Adelaida. Adelaida in this area there's a place of Adelaida. There's a road Adelaida. They've created a brand out of Adelaida. And so what we kept realizing is that Adelaida Sellers needed to own the place of Adelaida because it was so much wrapped into who they were and what they were as a brand. And so one of the things that we, in this exploration, started working with a designer, which we are not designers, started working with a label designer, going through this process. And if you go to the next slide, you will see that we were able to really change the motif of their brand, bring back the classic history of who Adelaida was, and be able to really own the message of Adelaida. And so moving from the faces, which didn't really have a story, to the classic label that you see on the right-hand side of Adelaida being prominently featured, going more to the classic look of who they are as a brand. And the pencil drawing that you see is actually the place where this picture was taken from. And so it really starts to resonate and bring all of those elements together. The label on the left-hand side, again, featuring Adelaida, took more of the historic approach with one of their key vineyards being the HMR vineyard as the oldest vineyard for Pinot Noir on the Central Coast. So it was just an opportunity to really look at the brand, recognize the fact that the brand did not necessarily resonate, and bring those two things together to better communicate with the audience overall. So I just wanted to share a little bit of a branding story as it relates to wine. We can go on. So as we understand our brand, then we can start to develop and tell our story. There's lots of ways we tell our story in terms of various communication channels, whether it be websites, press releases, blogs. I know everybody always gets a little nervous around generating and doing a blog yourself, but I will tell you that as we talk about content being king in the world of marketing and public relations, a blog gives you that opportunity to control your message and tell your story. And as we know in the world of short attention spans, blogs do not have to be lengthy and in-depth. They can be very much Q&A format. They can be short facts. I don't believe that blogs have to be a whole dissertation, but the key is people are interested in content. People want information. We're in an information-based world, and so a blog gives you yet another way to control and tell your story in a really unique and genuine way. As we talk about media relations, which is a key audience when we look at public relations as a whole, I'm a big believer that not all media work for all clients, and it's important to take a look at and identify a core group of writers that you really want to impact, and those writers that you want to make a difference. Because what I'm going to encourage you to do is identify those 25, 30, 40, 50, however many it is for your particular brand and product, and get to know those writers. Read what they're writing about, watch what they're talking about on social media, what events are they going to, what trends are they following. It's important because then what you are able to do is take your key messages and what's happening in your business and be able to let them know in a content-driven or genuine way and not always be trying to sell them something. So it's better to look at trends. A lot of writers will tell me that, you know, I don't have space to write beautiful profile stories. That's probably more of an advertorial or paid content placement these days. If you're looking for earned media, it's really looking at what are those trends that they're following. And the reason I say, you know, read what the writers are talking about, it's really all about establishing those relationships with writers. Writers, just like sommeliers and other members of the industry, are going to, you know, move to different outlets in which throughout their career. But if you establish that relationship with that writer, no matter where they move, they will know that you're going to provide them good content to help them do their job. In the world of media these days, these guys don't have time to go out and investigate for themselves. Rather, they are looking to their key contacts to help them bring content to them. So a couple of ways to help build those headlines that we're all looking for is to look at the tools that you have in your toolbox. You have events perhaps that may work. You also have wine or the product in which you're selling. So I'm a big believer that sending samples to help tell the story and begin the dialogue with your media contacts is a great way. Doesn't mean you have to send them everything in your portfolio, but if it's April and it's rosé time, send them your rosé, for example. I can't tell you how many rosé stories that we saw this summer. Top 10 rosés, great rosés, the trend of rosé that's going out. That's just one example of a way to help get your brand on the radar of these various writers. The other thing as we talk about media is there are so many different facets of writers. We're way beyond just talking about wine to the wine media. You definitely have the traditional wine media that's talking about wine, but now we have lifestyle media who are all looking at how wine pairs with food, how wine is part of a healthy lifestyle, just the overall aura of wine in general. And then, of course, you've got the travel writers, and especially as we look at the importance of direct-to-consumer marketing, to be able to get your brand associated with a travel writer and get looped into those roundup stories. As we all know, a travel writer, when they come to a destination, they're going to probably visit 3 to 5 wineries. If you can be one of those wineries in which to get your story picked up, you become part of the itinerary. As somebody researches when they're coming to Lodi or Paso Robles or Walla Walla and they look at travel stories, what an awesome opportunity. That's the kind of content that will stick around and be a very, very long-term content for folks. Then, of course, you have your local and your regional writers. It's important they are all looking, you know, it's harvest time as we are, everyone is getting ready and some people have already started picking. My email box has started flooding in with writers asking about who's the first to pick, what's going on, how does the harvest look? Again, an opportunity to tie into local and regional news aspects. And finally, bloggers. I want to give a big plug for bloggers. you can have your own blog, as we spoke about earlier in this slide, but also looking at the blogger community as a way to generate content and create more brand impressions for your story. It's a great opportunity. Again, that content lives out there on the web, and it will also become a catalyst for helping to increase your traffic and exposure on your digital marketing platform. So as we look at how I believe public relations plays a big part in terms of your overall strategy and being able to tell your story. We can go on to the next slide, which can just show some different examples of headlines that are generated. I mentioned those travel articles. The article that you see on the right-hand side, Pastoral Robles Evolves into a Wine Lover's Paradise, was in Oakland Magazine. This was a great example of a freelance writer who, of course, got a last-minute call from a magazine, had been to Pastoral Robles on a familiarization trip about 4 years ago, reached out and said, "What's new?" And that was a way that this story evolved, essentially. So again, it goes back to the relationship with the writer, knowing what they want, giving them news content to be able to help fulfill their need. And we were very excited as several of our clients obviously got mentioned in that particular piece. As I mentioned, wine samples as a tool. You can see in the middle the Adelaida Rosé being featured. That was from Meredith May and her publication of Tasting Panel. Again, another tool to create the dialogue with a writer of being able to send out samples. The story on the left, where it says Family Blends, is featuring Amavi and Pepper Bridge Winery. This is an example of the winemaker being on a sales-focused trip in New York, carving out an opportunity to host a couple of writers for lunch, being able to communicate the story, and 4 months later an article appears in Global Traveler magazine. So it's the reason I give some of these examples of how these things came to fruition is, again, looking at when you're on sales trips or you're in the marketplace, making sure that media is another part of the audience that you're trying to reach out to. And then the great story, winemakers turn distillers. This is a trend that we're currently seeing right now, where you've got the wine industry being the backbone of other niche industries happening, and this is demonstrating a new product that was really derived by using the free-run juice from the wine industry into a whole new product line of refined distillery. We can go to the next page now. This slide here just shows how some brands will take these public relations results and create a sales sheet to be able to give additional tools, whether it be for their in-house marketing folks, for their sales folks, and we'll see a little bit later how some of these different accolades are used. But this is a great way, again, on how to merchandise the public relations results that you are getting, to be able to use that through your multiple channels, whether it's training, giving your tasting room personnel some earned media credibility to be able to add additional talking points to their experience with the guests, or to your sales team who's out in the marketplace, just more ways to continue touting how your brand is being recognized through earned media and that garnering that third-party credibility. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So we're going to kind of move into marketing. So we've talked about kind of knowing your brand position, understanding your audience. Now we've defined our message and telling our story. And now it's really about bringing all those things together and the communication between your audience and your brand in the marketing platform. Again, I'm going to re-emphasize the key here on my mind is to create a plan and follow the plan and focus your efforts. I can't tell you how often I will get a call, should I advertise an X publication? And I will always say, what is your budget? What is your strategy? What is your end goal in terms of advertising? Because in my mind, it's not about a one-off. It's about more of a comprehensive plan on how all these things come together to reach your end goals. So you'll hear again and again from me, plan, focus, measure, because I think those are key aspects to overall looking at what really does move the needle in terms of your goals for your business. So the first thing in marketing is really understanding those markets. If you recall earlier in the dialogue, we spoke about knowing where your customer base is geographically located. And if you are 100% direct to consumer, I feel that's really important, because I think, you know, there's a couple of ways we can look at direct to consumer. Not only are people coming to your tasting room, but what events and how can you align opportunities in those marketplaces where you have a high concentration of customers and wine club members. So knowing your market will help you plan effectively to know, is Los Angeles really my target, or is it more dialed in to, say, Thousand Oaks or Orange County, for example? And we are big believers that not only are folks going to come to wine country, but you have to be present in that market to, again, show that kind of two-way street. So this is where a nice balance of restaurant placements and opportunities to be really unique in terms of reaching that message to those customers in that particular market. The next aspect is, as you know your market, and you start to plan different opportunities for outreach in those places, is look at different seminars and presentations. As you identify your key spokesperson, whether it be the winemaker, the owner, maybe you have a fantastic sommelier or ambassador on staff, who could be a spokesperson for your brand to sit on various panels and be that primary communicator and to start to position as an industry expert. There are lots of opportunities to be able to seek out and participate in these panels and discussions, whether it be around events or other opportunities. But I think that's another way where your customers see your brand as an authoritative figure to be able to, again, position what you're trying to accomplish. So the next topic of festivals and events, trust me, there is a festival and an event every day of the year, probably multiple in many ways that people can participate in. And first and foremost, you have to really evaluate which of those festivals fit your brand. Maybe none of them do. Maybe that's not your strategy at all. Maybe some of them do because they're in an area where a high concentration of customers are at, and perhaps you can plan additional outreach based on those key markets that you're looking at. So that is something that you can't, I don't think, typically budgets and time do not allow folks to be involved in everything, but there are probably a few key ones that do make sense for your brand. And while at the event, I can't tell you how many times I just remind people to maximize your event experience. It's a great opportunity because you're having dialogue directly with customers or potential customers. Ask them for their email address if you don't already have it. Again, people 9 times out of 10 are willing to give that to you. If you know you're in a certain market and you know you've been communicating to writers who might live in that area, send a note to that writer in advance of that event and invite them to stop by your table or booth. Again, it's a great way to keep in front of them, keep top of mind, and continue talking and creating that relationship on the different trends that they're looking at. The other key aspect of events is I think it gives you a great opportunity to meet and engage key influencers, whether that be sommeliers, maybe it's key influencer customers that you're looking at. As we all know in the wine world, the more we know, the more we realize we don't know, but our customers love knowing a few of those insider tips. And so perhaps you'll have some additional takeaways by participating in some of these festivals and events. We can go on to the next slide, please. So a few other areas in marketing is identifying strategic partners. I think as we all, many of us live in wine country, are associated with some type of wine association. Perhaps from my background, I feel very passionate about this, but working with your regional association, your varietal-based associations, they are here to serve their members and they want to work with you. So how can you work together? Does the association know what your focus is? Are they aware of what you're doing as a brand this year and what your goals are? A lot of times having that dialogue will bring opportunities, whether it be additional press opportunities, maybe it's wine submission opportunities, but wine associations are really wanting to work with their members, and it's a two-way street. I just remind everybody that it's a great opportunity to leverage this larger group who's focused on the brand and the regional identity on how your particular message fits into that story. I also want to make sure that we don't underestimate the power of travel groups. especially as we talk about direct-to-consumer. I gave the example earlier with the travel media and the importance of that. Travel groups, these travel associations, they are out there marketing the destination, and it's a great opportunity as they are bringing meeting planners into the area to make sure that wine and your brand is really a part of their offerings. A lot of these travel groups will have pretty high-powered websites and social media outreach where, again, maybe if you have news or a topic that might be a good blog idea, again, more ways to continue looking at those strategic partners. I'm sure there are other strategic partners that may be of interest to you. There are sommelier groups, there are restaurant groups, there are chef groups. Again, identify these based on what your what makes sense for your brand. Social media, I wanted to talk a little bit about this from a marketing sense. We talked about it from kind of a brand and understanding your audience. But as you understand your audience, I think what's important is to, in building that two-way conversation, first of all, understanding what channels your audience is playing on. So social media continues to grow and evolve. If you're really focused on the millennial group, maybe you've got to start looking at what Snapchat has to offer. I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to Snapchat, but we're looking at what's happening. Who would have thought the Pokemon phenomena that's taking off would be so powerful when we look at what's happening out there? But what can we learn from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all the other different channels? First and foremost, figure out what channels you want to play on. I highly recommend Instagram as one right now because A, I think it's really evolving, but B, we are in such a visual, based on the vineyards and the wine, we're a very visually driven type of industry. And so it's really easy. Everybody can become a social media expert, but channel that opportunity. So if you have a certain hashtag that you want to communicate, is that visible to folks? Do folks know what that's about? Some people are integrating their social media feeds into their websites for that organic content generation overall. One of the other pieces that I also recommend is creating a strategy around your social media. So one of the very simple things because the strategy will also help create content. We took a client who was just organically doing social media, and we put together a strategy. So every day of the week would have a different theme associated with it. And we just worked the plan. And it was really interesting what we saw because Fan Fridays, for example, would be a huge engagement factor. But Tasty Tuesday, I think everyone's working on Tuesday and didn't have time for social media. And we could really see the engagement as we created this trend. But overall, we were able to increase their reach by over 200% in terms of the data analytic points on social media. So I'm not saying social media will help you sell products. I'm saying it will help build and engage your audience. And it's another way, another channel where your earned media, you can take and merchandise that through those channels as well. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about awards. I think awards is something that, we know there's wine competitions out there. There's now travel awards, sustainability awards, business awards. It's another way to garner third-party credibility. I'm not saying that all wine competitions will sell wine. Don't get me wrong in that. But again, understanding, is there a relationship base that makes sense to be part of that wine competition? Is there a regional hook that will work as to why you want to be part of that wine competition? And what are some of these different awards that may make sense to, again, give you some tools to differentiate yourself on the marketing front? One of the case studies that I wanted to showcase was the Sunset Travel Awards. They launched this awards program in 2005. One of our clients, Halter Ranch, we entered them as their vineyard excursion tour. And so they ended up winning the 2005 Travel Awards for Vineyard Excursion Tour. That award allowed them not only the notoriety of winning, where they used the symbol. I grabbed the screenshot from their website on the left-hand page. You can see as part of one of their options, Shop Online Tour, and there's two other options there. They designate the award symbol so you can see as a winner. It also generated a beautiful article in Sunset Magazine that you can see next as you work your way across the page that features the owner, talks about the experience, and again, it gave them earned media credibility as a result of this award. And then they continue to use the award. Up in the right-hand corner is an example of an ad that they're currently using to tour, taste, and visit their winery, where they're really showcasing the experience at the winery, again, using the award as another qualifier. So that's another example, or just one example of how you can look at the value of awards beyond the wine competition type of award. So we want to go to the next slide. Here are some additional notorieties. The Green Awards, which is a sustainability award that the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance puts together. Two brands in the Paso area, Cobbles Creek and Halter Ranch, both received this award. This shows the statewide designation. Again, another logo that can be used as it makes sense in various marketing aspects. And then Halter Ranch was also noted as Wine Business Monthly Hot Brand a year ago, which is another designation that, if you go back to the sales sheet that I showed earlier in the presentation, you will actually see some of these different icons being used, again, to kind of create and generate that earned credibility on the marketing front overall. So just to round out and to summarize the presentation today, again, building and strengthening your brand reputation is really what this is all about. Knowing what you're about for your brand strategy and being true to your brand and the integrity of the product is critical. Defining your key messages to tell your story and developing strategies around that to help maximize and your public relations outreach. And then from a marketing perspective, creating that plan, executing that plan, and measuring the results overall of that plan. So these kind of three takeaways will help in terms of identifying and helping to continue to build your overall brand reputation. And I think that rounds us out. Is there a final slide? Fantastic. So with that, I appreciate, thank you very much for your time. Look forward to questions and furthering the conversation.
Wonderful presentation today. I just can't thank you enough, Stacie, for your time, for sharing your expertise and insights. The case studies especially were just so valuable in helping wineries of various sizes understand how to maximize use of earned content and unique storytelling to gain interest from the consumer audiences through PR and media outreach. So again, thank you so much for taking some time out. For those of you who have joined us today, now is your opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm going to go ahead